All right, well, let's get going. It is a rainy Thursday here up in New Hampshire. Hope that wherever you are, the weather is a little better. I can tell you that no one is complaining about their lawns right now because we have had maybe the rainiest last half of April and first part of May that I've seen on record. But moving into charter, here's what we can see. The volume has, on a year-over-year basis, gotten softer. It is a little softer than it was um, last month. I am hearing that echoed from people that I talk to out in the field. At least they feel that that's, reflective of what's going on. Things have slowed down a bit. You can see that it's not a dramatic drop off cliff, but it is a slightly weaker than we had same period last year. Part 91 is also weaker, but just not quite to the same degree. So it's still showing up 1.4%. You would see that that is all or nearly all Part 91K if we broke it out that way, but we do just lump Part 91 and 91K together when we do these reports. And so here it is again, it shows like it's a dip, but it's still above 100%. So it's slightly over 100%. It did not do as well as it did in April. So first half of May is a little weaker across the board. And same deal, combined traffic, but obviously this black trend line is not going dramatically up or down. It's fairly flat. When we look at our trends by size class, this is sort of the pattern we've seen for the past several months where the light jets are not doing so well, off 15.1% for this month, and that's worse than 8.6% year-to-date trend. When we look at mid-size, that's doing better, up actually 0.7%, but that's down from the 3.2% year-to-date average. Here are super mids, which have been sort of on fire in general for several years, but not quite doing as well as their year-to-date with a 1.5% month-to-date trend against a 6.6% year-to-date trend. Large cabin is the category that's doing the best right now. That was up 4.4% for the first half of the month of May, which is almost as good as the 4.7% year-to-date. Turboprops have been down considerably for the whole year, and that isn't changing. They're still off 10.1%. When we go and look at our major metro markets, this is Los Angeles, including all the airline traffic. You can see it's up slightly when we look at it that way. And then we've got an even bigger spike here when we pull out the airlines. So we're up 9.9% when we look at it that way. Here is Van Nuys, still trending down. I believe there's still runway construction going on down there that could be part of the reason for that. Shortened runway from what I'm being told. Here is LaGuardia, and you can see the big dips in volume, much more traffic, 1,100 flights a day or more during the week, and you get down to 700-ish on the weekend. Teterboro, this I put in my note, and this is really the biggest noteworthy development in terms of this report. You can see that the volume is off 22.2% in Teterboro for the first half of the month. It's not off quite that much if we fast forward to today. It's more like 18%. It's recovered a little bit, but it is way off from where it would normally be. And as I mentioned in my note before the call, this is really being driven by the ATC situation that's affecting Newark as well. So there have been several outages. I mean, it's made the major news. So I don't think it's a surprise to anybody that there is some impact down there. And there was an article that I linked to in the note that I sent out that's really talking about how when things went sideways was after the control of Newark and Teterboro. That sector moved to Philadelphia not that long ago. I think it was 6 months or so. And so some of those controllers from Long Island moved to Philadelphia, some didn't. But they now are relying on sort of network connections from Philadelphia up to the New York area for their radar and radios, and those have failed a couple times, and that's been part of the problem, as well as some issues with staffing when you kind of move. I think it was supposed to be 33 people, but not all of them moved and whatnot. So that's what's driving it. As you might imagine, if traffic is down at Teterboro and it's a localized issue, those planes are going to go someplace, and they did. The airport that has seen the biggest impact has been White Plains. And if you look at it on a day-to-day basis, there are days where it's been up 50% over last year. So White Plains typically is in the mid 200s to low 300 flights a day, and when you see it up in the 450 to, I mean, on April 12th, it was 483 flights. That is just a huge jump. I mean, I'm not sure they have a place to park that many extra airplanes on that airport. So I'm sure if you're there, you're feeling some extra chaos. Farmingdale isn't quite seeing it to the same degree, but on a percentage basis, it's up even more at 37%. So you can see that some of the aircraft are going there. And then when we look at Morristown, yeah, it's much less than even Farmingdale. But if you look at the last few days here, the 14th and the 15th, 108, 161 flights, when the average is more like 90, 80. So that's a huge, huge, huge bump over the last couple of days for Morristown. Then we go over to the middle of the country and Chicago Midway. This includes the airlines, and you can see the traffic is off about 9% for the month. Only off 0.2% when we look at it from a GA perspective, and you can see there was a nice peak there on May 14th, where there were 236 flights, which is pretty high for that airport. That would be a new peak day for compared to this year or last year for Midway. And then here's Chicago, Milwaukee, Chicago Executive, off just 0.1%. So for all intents and purposes, same as last year. Here's Atlanta Hartsfield, including all traffic, showing up 1.3%, which is off a tad from the year-to-date trend. And then here it is for the GA. Just GA is not strong in Hartsfield. Not that it's really that big ever. And then here you can see this is where the majority of the GA traffic goes in the Metro Atlanta market, and there we're up 0.6% with a 2.6% increase on the year to date. Boston is doing what it's been doing. This is the airline chart, so including all the airline stuff, up 0.9%. And we pull that out on the GA front, we're up 4.6%, which is slightly less than the year-to-date 6.2. Here is Bedford Hanscom, up 1%, which is better than the negative 1.4% year-to-date trend, so things are looking good there. And we come down to Reagan National. The dip here isn't quite as dramatic as the dip we see at LaGuardia, but it's the same pattern, domestic travel to a business market, so it drops off on the weekends. It is showing up 1.5%, and there is virtually no GA traffic here, so we don't break it out that way. Here is Dulles, on the other hand, where we do get a bunch of international traffic, which follows different day of week patterns. You can see that it's up considerably. I mean, this is airline traffic and everything. It's if you look at it last year, we were just starting to peak in the 900s, and now we're peaking, 1150. I mean, that's a huge jump in airline traffic into Dulles. Then when we pull out the airlines and just look at GA, it's also, pretty significant jump, 17.9% for the year to date and 17.1% for the month. And then we look at Manassas, the satellite airport that we look at least for the Metro DC market, and you can see it's up 19.7% for the month and 16.6% year to date. That's been a consistently strong trend there. And then here is Charlotte with all traffic off 2.2%, Charlotte and GA, opposite story, up 11%, which is even stronger than the year-to-date 7.7. So the guys that are in the banking capital of the US, they're doing okay. Here is West Hampton. We are starting to get into the season. The numbers are getting out of the single digits, 1.4% year-over-year growth, but we're still dealing with fairly small numbers. It's still just the very beginning of the season, as you can see by the gray line there. Here is Aspen. They are in runway construction season. You can see that just like past years, traffic pretty much goes to zero because they shut it down and do maintenance. Here is Aspen's just only GA, and the same story. Eagle does not shut down, and they are up 3.6% month to date against a 5.8% year-to-date trend. And then it's 8.1%, so a bigger bump, and 2.9% when we're looking at just the GA. Denver Centennial off 2.3%, but had a nice spike in there on the 15th, up 255 flights, which is pretty high for them. Nantucket, we're starting to get into the season there, and you can see we are showing off 4.2%, but things are starting to climb. We had a 172 flight day on May 15th. Here's Martha's Vineyard. Not quite seeing the same quantity of flights, but following the same pattern. It is showing off by 9% compared to last year, so things a little weaker there. There has been weather impacting that a little bit. The weather in the Northeast hasn't been awesome. Here is Napa, showing up 13% for the month, super popular this year. And then here is Bandon Dunes, also doing very well, up 26%. That's a big deal. We do have to keep in mind that these are, in some cases, barely double-digit flight counts, so those percents doesn't take much to show a big percentage swing. Here is Scottsdale, up 6.4%, and also had a very strong May 15th at 249 flights, which is pretty high for this time of year for Scottsdale. We're kind of sliding into the off season there as things heat up. Here is Jackson Hole that is starting to climb into their summer peak, up 6.9% month to date against a 9.9% year-to-date trend, so slightly off compared to the year-to-date, but climbing into their another one of their strong seasons. Here is Hilton Head. That big spike was their golf tournament a few weeks ago. Now we're trending off 3.5%. There was just a little dip there, and that's against a 4.5% year-to-date trend. Looking at our other cities bucket or category, here is Addison down in the Dallas market, showing off 1.3% against a 0.9% year-to-date trend. Dallas Love, including all the airlines in there, off slightly, and just a little bit of a dip, which is a reversal. We've had a few months here where Dallas Love's been trending above last year. This period, though, off 0.9%, so down slightly. Now we roll into Florida. We're up 4.3% for the month and 5.7% year-to-date. Fort Lauderdale International has dipped. This is including all the airlines. We just look at GA. It's a different story, up 10.9% for the month to date, 25.5% for the year-to-date. Fort Lauderdale Exec off 4.5% and 1%. And again, what I've noticed as I look at this, these two airports, is Fort Lauderdale International tends to be the transient airport of choice there, and Exec is more local traffic, so they just follow slightly different patterns. Here is Naples, off 2.5% compared to 5.5% year-to-date, so a little softer over there. West Palm Beach, which is the almost the second to last airport that we track here. Here it is with all the traffic, and it's off 7.7% year-to-date, 13.5% month-to-date, with a lot of dips due to the presidential TFRs that get even more dramatic when you look at just GA. So we're off 20.5% and 16.2%. I think it's pretty clear where the traffic goes, and it goes down to Fort Lauderdale International. We don't happen to have Stewart in the deck here. I would imagine that Stewart would benefit from these TFRs as well. And then finally, Nassau with the GA traffic. It's having a nice spring here, up 2.5% for the month to date and 5.8% year to date. And what I will say is I have on a different screen a chart for Newark, which I will show. We don't normally have that in the deck, but just based on what we were talking about, I think you'll find that interesting. Before we get to that, oh, pardon me, I forgot. We did put Bermuda in here as well. So now you're seeing Bermuda, and that's off 2% for the month, 3.7% for the year. They're also starting to climb into their summer season. Now we get into our top 50 routes. Let's go to the most recent here. Whoops. So for the first half of this month, I guess that got a little blurry in this version. We are seeing that the north-south route is dropping. So it's still in the top 10, right, with both Teterboro to Opelika and vice versa. But this I find a little interesting. Van Nuys to Teterboro and Teterboro Van Nuys are not normally the top OD pairs. So it's interesting to have such a high concentration on such a long leg. If we look at the year as a whole, generally speaking, it is Van Nuys to Vegas that is the most popular route, which is, a very short leg, and so therefore it's less expensive. And there are some people that like to say they flew privately, so they'll pony up for that short leg. When you see such a long leg taking the top two spots, that's interesting. And then here is what's going on in fuel. Let's get to the most recent week here. So you can see fuel prices in the West went down more than everywhere else, but they did go down everywhere. So fuel prices are improving. And when we look at it, no big differences here. Obviously, Colorado, Alaska, and Rhode Island are still our most expensive places to purchase fuel, with New York also kind of up there. Darker is more expensive on this chart. But most places are in the $5 a gallon range. I mean, slightly more than $5, right? Until you get out to Colorado or it's up in the sixes. And New York is also in the sixes on average. So that's what's going on the fuel side of things. And then what I will do is I want to show you Newark. And so here you go. This Newark chart, I mean, it's like it's fallen off a cliff. You can see that it's pretty normal this time of year to be doing more like 1,250 flights a day on these peak days in here. And now we're seeing lows that are in the sort of 800 to 850. I mean, that's 400 flights a day that aren't happening one way or another from these, the high to low. So that's a pretty dramatic drop, and the pattern is continuing. So that's airlines. I mean, I think you saw that United announced they were cutting back their schedules. I think other airlines have kind of done the same just because the thing has been such a mess. So the airline travel sector is kind of doing the same thing that we're seeing in the GA sector, maybe to an even greater degree. I mean, it's certainly more flights that they've cut out of there. So there is that. And that's what I've got for this week. If anybody has questions, topics you want to ask, you can unmute yourself or throw it into the chat. If there's a chart you'd like to see again, I do have this up live real time this week. So if you wanted to see another airport, I can type it in and pull it up for you in real time. So just let me know. Anybody have any personal stories on stuff where their people have gotten stuck in any of the chaos there in Teterboro or had to do anything wacky? If you have, I'd love to hear it. If not, then we can wrap it for this week. We're going to be 2 weeks out from today. Will be the next call, and that will give us the end of the month of May. If I look at my calendar, let's see, that's going to make it June 5th will be the next call. So have a great second half of May, and we'll talk to you in a couple weeks. Thanks, everybody.
Oh, looks like somebody just asked for the FXC slide again.
Oh, yes, you did. David, happy to pull that back up. Just bear with me 1 second. Let's see. Oops, I went past it. There's FXC. All right. All right. Thanks, everybody. We will see you in a couple weeks. Take care.